It's time for the Volquest podcast, where we dissect the biggest news items of the week.
Good Tuesday, everybody, and welcome into the Volquest podcast. Big thank you to everybody who's jumped on board with us over at On3 right now. Incredible deal, $1 for 1 year. It's on our website, and of course, we tweeted out on the dailies, so appreciate you guys for jumping on board, and of course, for always following our work at Volquest on YouTube as well. Awesome price. Brent Hubbs, Rob Lewis. I am Eric Kane. A lot to talk about. The season is finally here, and Brent Hubbs, Tennessee, a 59-10 season opening win over Ball State.
Yeah, I mean, look, Tennessee did what they needed to do. They took care of business. Hats off to them for that. Now it's time to move past that one pretty quick here and go into a different set of challenges because they just didn't get challenged by Ball State, particularly Ball State's defense. Rob, I was surprised Ball State basically wanted to play 7-on-7 football on the back end and not even really try to make Hendon Hooker even see if they can make him uncomfortable at all. Jabari Small saying on Monday they didn't have a blitz pickup all night long at the running back position. Really surprised me the way Ball State attacked Tennessee defensively.
Yeah, it was just, kind of, selling out to keep everything in front of them. My first impression was that Tennessee was pretty vanilla. Hendon didn't really try to push it down the field, but rewatching, like Jabari said today, it seemed like they almost, rushed 3, sometimes 4, but basically bailed 8. And, my take after watching it was I was really impressed that, Hooker just didn't gamble because that was a game where, if you wanted to make a big play and forced one at a 50-50 ball, it wasn't going to be the end of the world if you had an interception. But he was really mature, really patient, and, took what they gave him all night long.
Well, Tennessee ran the football well, Austin. Obviously, you want to come out and establish the run. That's what Josh Heupel wants to do in this offense. And I recognize it's Ball State, but you had 2 backs, 13 carries apiece. Jabari Small on that 1 touchdown run where he just kept churning his feet, and Javonte Spraggins gave him the assist there. And then, Jalen Wright, thought it was important for him to get a whole lot of work, get some contact because he really hadn't had a whole lot of contact throughout fall camp, being out that much. But specifically those 2 guys, because they're going to need them in pass pro, obviously, but also to run the football this week at Pitt.
Yeah, again, Jalen Wright had such a great off season. I thought it was good for him to get his first contact work of the fall because he didn't get in fall camp, and we kind of knew that going in, and got his first couple of hits, and really I thought got better as his reps went along. He was very, very very, I guess I would say gunshot first, and then as he went on, it started to get more and more confident. Jabari Small, more confident, and so a running game that still has to be better this week. They need to be able to run the ball this week against Pitt. They get in a close game, Brent. They may need to close one of these games out, and they're going to do that on the ground.
Yeah, they do. They ran for 136 yards against Pitt last year. Strange game last year, though, when you start going back and looking at it, and I know everybody's kind of taking a look at that. That was a strange deal because Tennessee had a rash of injuries. Jabari Small, Jalen Wright getting his first real action as a player was thrown into the fire against Pitt. Jerome Carvin's playing center. They lost Cade Mays in that game as well. Tennessee was playing, I won't say one hand tied behind her back, but that was a very different Tennessee team against Pittsburgh than what you saw really the rest of the season. But they've got to run the football better. I think this Pitt team is a little bit you got a better feel for them because they played better competition. But at the same time, too, Eric, they didn't play, to me, the caliber of talent that Tennessee has. So there's still quite a bit. There's still quite a bit of unknowns, I guess you could say, about Pitt when you're talking about, even though they played better competition in week 1 than Tennessee did.
No, I would agree. And, you look at Tennessee, you like what they, like a lot of what they did offensively, of course, because the tempo they were going, Pat Narduzzi spoke on that on The Nation as well. And, they were going about as fast as they want to, ran 86 plays. They spread the wealth around offensively, but again, wasn't challenged a lot. You had Ball State that would drop 8 in coverage on third downs. As you mentioned, Jabari Small saying that they didn't have a pass pickup whatsoever. That's all going to change this week. Tight ends are going to have to be involved. Charlie Browder, came up a little limp the other night, and of course Hunter Salmon was pressed into action. Tennessee's going to need to play 3 tight ends, of course. What's the status of Miles Campbell moving forward? A lot of that's going to be different this week. That we didn't really get to learn a whole lot. I just think from a season opening game, Austin, I think it was good to see all that, but still there's some unknowns that we're going to find a lot about this team come up Saturday night when it's all said and done.
Yeah, and this kind for everybody. Where do you feel like Tennessee's got to be, I won't say significantly better, but better this week than maybe last week? Obviously, you're not going to – they were very vanilla in certain phases with the game plan, the fact they didn't blitz a whole lot. But where do you feel like they've got to be better this week going into game 2 versus after one game?
Well, I think for me that they have to be better on your offensive line. Left tackle, what do they do there? We don't know. That's an unproven situation. And they got to get to the quarterback, Rob. I know Ball State took that away, but I just and I know Josh Heupel was complimentary of his defensive front. I just didn't think they moved the quarterback off the spot enough upon a rewatch. Maybe I was hypercritical because there's been so much talk about Byron Young and Tyler Barron and being able to get home with 4. I didn't expect him to come out of there with a bunch of sacks because of the way Ball State played, but I just didn't think they were as effective as I thought they would be with their 4 down linemen in terms of pass rush.
Yeah, Hubbard, I mean, I would take it one step further. It wasn't just the lack of pass rush, and as you mentioned, I mean, Ball State was hyper focused on getting that thing out early. So, I give them a little bit of a break on that, but they just weren't very disruptive up front. What do they have on them? Two tackles for loss on the night, if I'm not mistaken. Just didn't create a lot of negative plays up there. I think, Ball State had 17 first downs on the night. Tennessee emptied the bench in the second half, but they just didn't create havoc in the front 7 like I thought they would. And I mean, I think that's got to be better. And I think they're going to have some chances against Pittsburgh. Pittsburgh gave up 5 sacks to West Virginia. They did not run the ball very well. I think they finished 76 yards, 75, 76 yards rushing. And so
they tried to run it, Rob. They tried to run it.
They had 38 rushing attempts, and some of those, again, 5 sacks. So those are 5 rushing attempts that go down. But Pittsburgh was not very effective on the ground. So I mean, I really feel like Tennessee's going to have an opportunity there in the front 7, but they're going to have to do better than what we saw last Thursday, in my opinion.
And again, I think a lot of what Thursday was, and I just the way I was explaining it to a buddy the other day, Tennessee didn't have to do a whole lot. It was Ball State. Tennessee jumped up to a big lead. Sure. Would you like to rep some of those loops, twists, turns, bringing pressure from the second level? I mean, sure. I don't think it was like they're trying to keep it away from the tape or anything. You didn't have to do any of that because of Ball State and you had a big lead. They will get more complex this week, no doubt, because they did not play games up front. And Austin, I think that's something we're going to see a lot of moving forward this week. I do want to ask all you guys, but, Austin, we'll start with you. The question we've all been asked all over the weekend, Warren Burrell. What did you think about his play, how teams are going to continue to attack him early in football games, and overall kind of his status in the defensive backfield for Tennessee?
Yeah, for me, I think that's exactly where Pitt will go early and often when they throw it. I mean, Coach Narduzzi wants to run the football. He was very vocal about it all offseason about, their change from the, Coach Whipple to their new OC and, how they're going to get back to being a little more smash mouth. But when they do throw it, I expect them to try to pick on Warren Burrell. Why not? I mean, he gives a lot of pad. And maybe that's some by design, but, it just seems like a lot of teams at the end of last year, right into the start of this year are kind of going at him. I would also expect Pitt to, throw a wrinkle or two at Tennessee offensively, whether it be trick plays or whatever, because I think, Tennessee kind of fell into that, going to sleep last year, a couple of times, not against Pitt, but, in the game before Pitt, they had the trick play used on against them for a touchdown. I think, why not throw some wrinkles at Tennessee? But I expect them to go right at Warren Burrell, which is why I said on Saturday and on Sunday, Tennessee needs Kamal Hadden to come on They need him to establish himself, take that job, and run with it. I know he was injured during fall camp. I know they only played him limited snaps the other night, but he looked by far the most comfortable, most confident corner that Tennessee's got on the roster, which is why they need him to play a lot more than 18 snaps.
And Brent, to even further that point about Warren Burrell, this is from Pro Football Focus. Burrell was targeted 11 times on Thursday night. He gave up 6 receptions. That's a 54.5 reception percentage, but targeted 11 times. The next closest, I mean, Kamal Hadden got 4 targets. Christian Charles got 4 targets. I mean, it's obvious. 5 targets went Jeremy Banks' way over the middle of the field, but that's just a process of playing middle linebacker. They're going to go after Warren Burrell. Ball State watch tape, Pittsburgh's watch tape, and Kamal Hadden and others are going to have to step up if Warren Burrell cannot overcome that. I thought he did a nice good job a couple of times recovering. He was in man coverage a couple of times, moving all over the field in motion, making the tackle in front of the sticks. I pointed that out in my review piece, but they're going to go after him. And so others have to be ready to step in and play at a more consistent rate like Kamal Hadden.
Yeah, well, everybody's going to go after 4. I mean, that's going to be on the scouting report until Warren Burrell makes enough plays that people don't want to go at him anymore. But the one play, if we're just talking about him specific, Rob, the one play for me that bothered me the most is it was a 3rd and 5 or 3rd and 6, and he let the guy get all the way to the sticks, and had a 3 or 4 yard cushion there and couldn't recover in time. I mean, you got to trust and play the sticks right there. That was the one technique for me that I thought he gave up an easy first down on that particular play. But look, he's got a reputation for giving up plays, and being afraid of getting beat over the top or being hesitant about getting beat over the top. So he's not super aggressive, and everybody's going to continue to come at him until he makes some plays. That's just the way it is.
Well, you said this, and a couple of weeks ago, maybe 3 weeks ago, but he just doesn't seem like he plays with confidence.
Agreed.
I mean, and that was your point. I mean, I'm just repeating it, and I mean that's what it looked like Thursday night. I mean, athletically, from measurables, you're talking about a long, 6 foot whatever corner with long arms and a guy that can run. He just doesn't. It's a position, other than quarterback, maybe the position where confidence is the most important on the football field, and I'm not sure that that he really looks like a guy that has a lot of it.
Well, that's what Jonathan Wade talked about, Eric, on the Rocky Top Rewind on Sunday night when we were doing that show. We were talking about Warren Burrell. What do you do? And he's like, sometimes it just takes one play. If one good thing happens to you, you kind of get your mojo back and get
kind of like saying a shot go in basketball.
Yeah, same principle. Shot go in basketball for a guy who's maybe not shooting it real well, or a guy on the green. See a putt go in, and suddenly your putting stroke gets realigned a little bit. I don't think he was as bad as a lot of fans wanted to make him out or to suggest that he was, but he's clearly the guy that everybody's going to attack right now, and Pitt's going to attack him and go at him on Saturday, and we'll see how he responds.
I think it was the great Shane Falco in the movie The Replacements that said, quicksand, one thing goes wrong, then another, then another, then another. And what Wade was talking about on the Rocky Top Rewind was sometimes you just need one pick, and then to even simplify, just have one good rep, one good game, and then maybe you can kind of reverse that course moving forward. A couple more things just here on this Ball State game, then we'll move on to Pitt. But Austin, I think something that we saw a lot of rotation. We saw the entire second unit offensive line, some skilled players, and of course Joe Milton on defense. They were rotating that front 7 pretty much all game. Corners, those 2 safeties, man, they played well into the third quarter, and finally you got some reinforcements in there. I think we'd like to see some safeties get a little bit more run early on, but Josh Heupel said, hey, you're going to rotate, but those guys are going to get the bulk of the work every single game.
I remember Hubs calling me at one point last year on a Sunday and saying, Austin, they won by 40 points, and Trayvon Flowers and Jalen McCullough were there at the end playing 78 snaps or whatever it was. It was something silly. I just don't get it, man. I'll never understand it. I don't know if, because Tim Banks, who runs the safeties, is in the box, that they fall asleep in rotating guys at that position. I don't know what it is. It makes no sense why those 2 guys were in the game as long as they were. At least not to me. Not when you never know when one of those guys could go down, and you're going to have to push some of those guys, Rob. And when you got to throw some kid in that hadn't played a whole lot, even if it's a veteran like a Turntime's not played a ton, but he's been in the Ohio State program for a couple of years, or a Wesley Walker or whoever. I mean, like, that's not an easy gig if you've not played any of this defense or bare bones.
But you've got the Nico Slaughter there, who has played, a bunch. I mean, he's a third year in your program. He's a backup. I mean, me and Kane were talking during the game as it unfolded. I was trying to keep up with it because I was writing something about it. Jalen McCullough is the only guy on defense that didn't come off the field in the first half. I mean, they rotated everybody out except for him. And I'm not, trashing Flowers and McCullough as players, but I mean, just to the point you just made, why are those guys playing 70, 80 snaps and, in games where you're winning by, 40, 50 points?
It's the chance to develop guys that they missed out on those opportunities last year. We mentioned the Missouri game countless times, South Carolina. They did, for the most part, well, all across the board, except the safety position, which I just don't understand. Flipping the script down to Pittsburgh, Tennessee, obviously flipping the script. Numerous times players, Jerome Carvin, Jabari Small said, hey, we remember that football game, bad taste in our mouth from last year. They never said revenge or anything like that, but it's a game that stuck with them. Both those players, Josh Heupel mentioned how physical this Pitt football team is going to be. And one thing's for certain, though, on the Nation last night, Austin, Pat Narduzzi's not pleased with how his Pitt team performed in the backyard brawl. Excited for the win, but not pleased whatsoever with the performance of his defense.
No, I mean, they gave up, some points, more so than he probably would have hoped they would have. I think it kind of works two ways. You don't get yourself beat up when you're playing a team like, Ball State. But on the flip side, you can kind of find out where you have some deficiency if you're in Pittsburgh playing, West Virginia. So, I think he's able to go back to work and go, okay, hey, defensive line, you got to be better in this area. Linebackers, you got to be better in that area. And so I think that does give them a little bit of advantage because I think they probably have a better feel for who they are than Tennessee does. But at the same time, they have some nicks and bruises coming out of that game because it was such a physical game.
I think it's going to be fascinating to see just kind of these two go at it because there's such a contrast in styles. And Josh Heupel wants to do things. Look, they've played each other enough. Josh Heupel really wants to win this game. Pat Narduzzi really wants to shut down, the love affair that is, Josh Heupel's offense. And they've had some slugfest. I mean, they've gone at it pretty good back when he was at Central Florida and Narduzzi was at Pitt. So you got a real contrast in styles, and you got two hyper competitive guys that are going at this thing here. And neither one of them give a lot of ground. Is the other thing that jumps out to me, Rob. I mean, here's Tennessee. They love the big play, and Pat Narduzzi is going to go out there with his corners and say, you're going to play press man, and we're going to come get you. And if we don't get home, that we may give up a play. And Tennessee had a chance for a bunch of plays last year, and they didn't get it. But Pat Narduzzi never changed the way he played. Josh Heupel's not going to change the way he plays either, So I think it's just, It's a real interesting battle because it is two real conflicting styles going at each other, which makes this a really intriguing matchup for me.
Yeah, and me too. And I haven't gone back and studied it in detail, the Pitt West Virginia game, but have looked at all the numbers and what some of it really surprised me how much success West Virginia had on the ground. And as you alluded to, earlier, I mean, Heupel, the offense gets all this hype for being flashy and pushing the ball downfield, but really at the core, I mean, Heupel wants to run the football. Tennessee was second in the SEC in rushing last year, and that's where they're going to start on Saturday. And if they can run the ball, if they approach having the same success that West Virginia had, I mean, West Virginia ran for almost 200 yards, I think 190, averaged well over 5 yards a carry. I mean, if Tennessee has that kind of success on Saturday, I mean, I've already picked Tennessee to win, but I mean, I really like Tennessee's chances a lot if they're getting 5-6 yards a carry. I mean, that is the number that surprised me more than anything from that West Virginia game.
If I gave you Pitt and 21, would you still take Tennessee?
Probably not.
Come on, Rob, have some faith. Go home.
Go ahead, Rob.
I mean, the 6 yards a carry, I think it was 5.8 actually. That really caught me off guard just because of, studying Pitt in the offseason and, seeing what they brought back and, Narduzzi's reputation. They've got a lot of guys back in the front seven. So, and maybe West Virginia is a lot better than I think they are, but I think they're pretty average. And for them to have that kind of success, that was pretty eye-opening for me.
Yeah, and the misnomer about Josh Heupel's offense is that it's all about passing the football. I mean, they want to run the football, and when they're at their best and at the core, that's who they are. I think in half the games he's coached at Tennessee, they've rushed for over 200 yards. And you're right, Rob. If they hit that kind of number, man, then this Tennessee offense got a chance to hum really good on Saturday, because you're going to put all kinds of pressure on Pittsburgh's defense if you can line up and run the football effectively. And I think Jerome Carvin and those guys know that, and we'll see how they respond to it, and we'll see how they play at the left tackle position, because this is the test, right? Like no offense to Ball State, you didn't learn anything about left tackle. Okay, Gerald Mincey's athletic, but we knew he was the more athletic guy going in, right? You knew he was the bigger guy, looked the part better than J.J. Crawford going in. Now it's, can he handle it when it gets haywire? How does he play there? They just weren't tested. So that big question mark remains, and we'll see how they handle it. If Tennessee can handle that up front and have some success like West Virginia had, then I'm with Rob. I think Tennessee's got a chance to have a great day.
Yeah, and as Rob pointed out in his scouting the opponent piece way back when, I mean, this defense has 6 players who garnered all ACC selections returning. Got a couple guys up front, and Jerome Carvin and Jabari Small both spoke on how familiar they are with this defense. Baldonado at the defensive end had a sack last week. Hansey at the defensive tackle. He's a force that played well last year against Tennessee. At linebacker, you have Dennis in the middle, I think. Had 10 tackles against West Virginia, had a sack. And then, of course, they had a big play towards the end of the football game in the backyard brawl. They had a 56-yard interception return, of course, for a touchdown that was
a gift. A gift is what that was. An
right
unbelievable gift.
It was a good throw from Daniels.
Yeah.
And so you kind of know what you're going to get defensively, at least from the personnel, because they're very familiar with it. But again, as you guys have mentioned, the opportunities to run the football, it's kind of eye-opening compared to their first game. Now, you look at offensively. No Kenny Pickett. You have Kedon Slovis. We can get to him in a moment, but Pitt's going to want to run that football. We mentioned earlier 38 rushing attempts, averaged not even 2 yards a carry, I believe. It was really, really bad. Nonetheless, they're going to oftentimes, and Heupel mentioned this on Monday, they're going to oftentimes throw another offensive tackle out there. In fact, if you go look at the participation sheet, the starting lineups from this backyard brawl, there are 6 offensive linemen listed in the starting lineup. I haven't watched play number 1 from that football game, but I'm intrigued if they just went out there and tried to just run it up the gut from the get-go. It's going to be physical up there. They're going to try to run the football. And then Kedon Slovis, Rob, is a guy that's good enough, had a good game against West Virginia, to work that play-action pass and get over the top if you're not careful.
Yeah, I just don't think they have the playmakers that really scare you. That's what I think Pitt has to have a really good game defensively for Tennessee to get out of sorts. And I know, Las Vegas has Tennessee favored. I think probably, I don't know about Mr. Negative Hubbard, but I think most of us probably have Tennessee winning. I think Tennessee's catching Pitt at a good spot. I mean, Slovis has obviously got some talent, but he's your second game in a new system. If Pitt's defense doesn't really show up and give Tennessee problems, I like Tennessee's chances.
I'll make sure Hubs' wife slips him a couple of pain pills before he does the picks. That way he's feeling good and picks Tennessee.
What's interesting about Pitt on the offense, the offensive side of the ball, is that is such a group of veteran offensive linemen that they tout. What like 200 starts or whatever their number is now up to. It seems like, because some of those guys are COVID guys who have come back. I mean, they have played a lot of football.
Gave up 5 sacks.
Yeah, they should be the bell cow for them offensively. And I think that's what Pat Narduzzi was hoping for and talking about this summer. They did not play that way. So it'll be interesting to see how that unit responds and how the defensive front responds after week 1 heading into week 2 for Coach Narduzzi. Because, again, coaches will tell you they make their biggest jumps and all that kind of stuff. There's a lot of tape and a lot of evidence for those guys to improve upon. We'll see what kind of improvement they make.
And again, trying to run the football and speaking with some people at Pittsburgh over the offseason, Rob, I'm not even going to try to say this guy's name. Have you mastered this guy's name, the Israel running back?
That's an AP name.
Anyway, he's a guy that had a little bit of an injury last year that they're going to try to get back into the fold. But it was Rodney Hammond Jr. that carried the football 16 times against West Virginia, and they throw the football to the running backs in the backfield a lot as well. I think 2 running backs had 2 receptions out of the backfield against West Virginia.
And
so
their
it's going to be a challenge.
Their longest run of the night was 13 yards.
Yeah,
from a tailback. I mean, that's.
Yeah.
I think
maybe West Virginia is way better than I think they are. Maybe I'm selling Pitt short, but I just was offensively, I was just not very impressed with Pittsburgh.
Tennessee scored 34 points against Pittsburgh last year. It's new year, new team. I get it. 34 points with a backup quarterback coming in the second quarter, down your starting 2 top running backs, 3 top running backs, excuse me. Cade Mays, I think we discussed earlier on Monday, went down in this football game. Cooper went down. I mean, Tennessee was back against the wall.
There was no Byron Young in this football game.
Had chances to win last year. I think if you score 34 this week, then you're in a good spot, AP.
Yeah, I don't disagree. I think Tennessee's going to score more than 34, but maybe I'm out there on that. But I mean, if you scored 34 at home with I think a year later, how many points do they leave on the board with overthrows in the first half? I mean, that's kind of where I go with it. I mean, I'm not saying that Pitt's not going to have some points because, I think they will. I'm just saying I think a lot of it depends on how does Pitt play. Does Pitt just go Georgia Tech 2017? I know they're not running the triple option, but just try to hold the ball and keep the ball away and kind of do what Kentucky did. At times, the last couple of meetings, Tennessee's played Kentucky up in Lexington. I mean, I think it's possible, but I think for the most part, Tennessee's going to have their chances, coming up this weekend.
All right, so Tennessee and Pittsburgh coming up this weekend. Of course, we will have plenty of coverage leading up to that football game all week long.
Before we moved on to the next topic, do we think that Tennessee wears orange pants in honor of Johnny Majors coming up this weekend? I mean, Coach Majors loved the orange pants, right?
Yes, he did. And I would think that there's a real possibility and a good likelihood that they might do that. We've got a bunch of stuff on the site all week long in regards to Coach Majors, something that I've enjoyed doing with Carmen Tagano for the start of a podcast project that we're working on that's going to be a part of some stuff this fall with former players. And if you haven't done your research, it's amazing how revered Johnny Majors is at Pittsburgh. I mean, statue being unveiled for him this week up there. Of course, he won a national title. But the interesting thing about Pittsburgh is when Coach Majors got there, they were on the verge of going from Division I down. They were getting ready to go down and not play Division I football and drop down because they had no financial funding and they didn't want to make any kind of commitment to athletics, particularly to the football program. And so pretty fascinating in terms of what Coach Majors built in a short period of time there when he arrived to a Pitt program that had not been very good. So I would like to see Tennessee in orange pants. I know Pittsburgh will make a big deal about honoring Coach Majors throughout the week and certainly on Saturday as well.
It was a fun weekend of college football, and kind of on that note with Pittsburgh as well. And it had an impact in this game last year. Special teams. That was kind of the theme of week 1 in college football over the weekend. You saw it on Sunday nights, Florida State's and LSU, of course. Just the little things little things can work against you, rather. Rob Lewis, big things that stood out to you in week 1 around the college football slate. A lot of fun games, exciting games, and one game with Appalachian State, North Carolina that, goodness gracious, they almost scored 200 points.
Just the Florida State LSU game is so fresh in my mind. It's just I read this somewhere on Twitter today, so it's not something I had filed away. But the most hilarious thing in the aftermath of LSU fumbling 2 punts, missing an extra point, having a field goal block, the only coach that followed Brian Kelly from Notre Dame was his special teams coach.
It was a mess. I mean, you go look at it. I think when you look at the college football landscape, that was the craziest game that you've ever seen. I mean, I don't know what Florida State was trying to do at the end, pitching it. Why are you pitching it at the line of scrimmage? You had just run fullback dive the previous drive, and nobody at Florida State's following it on social media, but everybody's going, God bless the fullback. Somebody's under center, and then all of a sudden they want to turn and pitch it off the goal line, which was crazy. But when you look at the big picture and the big landscape of college football over the weekend, boy, what a rough weekend for the Pac-12. I mean, that conference has got some major issues in terms of where they're at. You know, their two best programs were supposed to be Oregon and Utah, and both of them coming to SEC territory and get beat. And of course, Oregon got trounced. And a rough weekend for the ACC. I mean, if LSU doesn't screw up special teams, I mean, the ACC's got nothing that they're hanging their hat on, because East Carolina should have won. Appalachian State should have won or could have very easily won. Louisville was terrible against Syracuse. Maybe Miami's the best team in the ACC right now. I don't know, but not a great weekend for those two conferences, but a great weekend to sit and watch a bunch of crazy football games, which is why we all love this sport.
Hubbard, did you see UCLA's home crowd?
Not a lot of people in the house.
Also,
Not a lot of people in the house there.
What do you on that note, I sit there in the press box Saturday, and I thought, what are the emotions that Brew McCoy is feeling right now? One, getting to be back out on the field, but the two, be in the atmosphere. And I mean, Neyland was not nearly what Neyland can be, because it was Ball State, it was a Thursday, but it was still really good. And, you know, it's just so much more superior to anything in the Pac-12, minus maybe Oregon, as far as just like on a Thursday Ball State game. Neyland's superior to Oregon, period. But like, there's nothing that even comes close to SEC atmospheres but Oregon out there. What do you think the emotions were for him?
Well, I mean, I think just the emotions of getting to play in general were probably overwhelming to him after setting out a year and then having to go through all he went through in the month of August to get there. But, you know, I think for everybody, I mean, for anybody who plays, I hate the mantra, because we all make fun of it. It just means more, but it is different. Whatever anybody wants to say. I mean, it is different in the SEC, which is why Greg Sankey's not worried about expansion. He's not worried about how many conference games he plays. He's not worried about college football playoffs. I mean, he's got the conference that everybody's still trying to chase. And I know the Big Ten got their big TV deal and all those types of things, but the passion of it in the SEC is just so different than everybody else around the country. I mean, it's pretty remarkable. And as a result, you're seeing the investment in the programs, and you see the SEC go 13-1 this weekend. And you know, a couple of teams didn't play particularly well. You know, there's a lot of question marks about some teams. I thought Texas A&M was Ole Miss was you know, nice win for Arkansas. Kentucky took them a while to get going. Really nice win for Billy Napier. You know, Alabama's what we thought they would be. I didn't make anything out of Auburn this weekend, but just again, the SEC proved to everybody this weekend that they're still the SEC and everybody's still chasing them. And it's the hardest league to catch up to the other teams in the league.
Anything about Florida, Utah you want to say, Austin? I know you put some notes on the board. I thought the Utah college football playoff conversation over the offseason was well hyped. I think Rising's a decent little quarterback, but
it was all based off of their performance in the Rose Bowl.
Yep.
How they put, they could have easily beat Ohio State, but I was an Ohio State team that had several guys out. But still, it doesn't matter.
I still picked Utah to win that football game,
and they still had their main talent. In Jigba and obviously, what they do at the quarterback spot there is really, really good. But they had a ton of guys returning. I get why, because some people are just looking for, it's easy to go Alabama, Georgia, Ohio State, and, Clemson bounces back, and there's the four, right? I mean, everybody's looking at me. Dan Mullen had NC State making the playoff in his out of left field top pick. So, I mean,
maybe that's why Dan Mullen's an analyst right now, because obviously no research was done in that way. But to your point, Austin, I know exactly what you're saying, which brings up this question: should you wait 3 weeks in to rank anybody?
Yes, I mean you do that for the old BCS did that. You've got the college football playoff that does that a little bit earlier now than the BCS did, but like you wait till X amount of games are played before you do any rankings, because it's all just kind of hogwash. I mean, Tennessee was ranked preseason third in 2005. They went 5-6. Each team is different. They each have their own turmoils. They have each their own positives or negatives, that a lot of fans don't necessarily see. And so, I think you should wait a handful of weeks before you go ranking anyone.
Yeah, I'd be a big fan of that. I mean, I get why it's out there. I mean, it gives everybody something to talk about. But even just go back to last year, Michigan wasn't ranked in the preseason. End up in the playoffs. I mean, rankings the first week of September just are meaningless.
I mean, they create conversation. I get it, but it also creates a question about how good are teams, right? So like how good is Florida? Okay. That they went at home against a team that was cramping, 4 minutes into the game and throwing up on the sideline in the first quarter because Utah was struggling with the heat. And I'm not taking anything away from Florida's win. That's a big time win for Billy Napier in game number 1. But in 3 weeks, we're going to look at that and go, wow, that was a really big win because Utah's really good. Or are we going to look at that and go, maybe Utah's got more issues than everybody thought about. Biggest takeaway from Florida is the fact that you're going to have to deal with Anthony Richardson. When you get good Anthony Richardson and he's playing under control, you get your hands full to try to get with him. You got to try to figure out a way to make him throw the football and beat you and try to limit his legs, which I think is going to be really hard to do because I think they're going to continue to grow with him and what they do in terms of some of the quarterback run stuff. He was, and I'm not saying Tennessee can't beat them because of that, but there looked like there was some growth from Anthony Richardson in the offseason under Billy Napier.
That game's coming up in 2 weeks. The LSU game that we all watched a couple of nights ago, that's coming up after the bye week in about a month.
You'll find a lot. You'll find out a lot, Kane, this weekend when Florida plays Kentucky. You'll find out about Kentucky and you'll find out about Florida. Just a little bit more about each.
Still, though, Kentucky could be down one of its best players, so we will have to see. Oh, yeah. And the college football playoff will be expanding. So we're fast and furious into the college football season. There is no shortage on storylines. And, of course, Tennessee football, all the coverage, everything you need about Tennessee from the Ball State win. And, of course, leading up to the Pittsburgh game. You can find it at Volquest.com. Been fun. Been a great weekend, guys. Had a whole lot of fun on the On3 network. It's been a great transition. Please continue. If you haven't already and you're listening to this podcast, just go to Volquest.com. There'll be a tab up at the top that says, hey, $1 for 1 year. What do you have to lose? If you've ever wondered what it's like to be a part of the Volquest family, inviting all Tennessee fans, take advantage of the deal. $1 for 1 year. And, of course, as always, continue to follow our work and subscribe to the Volquest YouTube channel. For Austin Price, Brent Hubbs, and Rob Lewis, I'm Eric Kane. Thank you so much for hanging out with us here on the Volquest podcast. Enjoy the rest of your Tuesday, everybody.
You've been listening to the Volquest podcast every week here on Volquest.